Here we go.
Got it.
Hello. All right. So I have notes in front of me, which I rarely do. And the notes aren't good. The main note was just to record. So nice. I'm here with a friend who used to moderate the Neville subreddit. Her name is Cecilia. And Cecilia, I don't know if you know this, but over the past week or two, you know, I usually go wildly off topic when it comes to this manifesting stuff, but I was like, you know, we're going to look at Neville's manifesting instructions, specific instructions from 5 lessons, like the end.
I have watched those.
Yes, you did watch it. Okay. So I thought of a couple of things. One thing I thought of is that when you moderated the Neville subreddit, and I have a feeling we're going to get more into the horrific details of what that means. When you moderated it, I remember you saying that, especially for like the weekly like Q&A and like introduction to Neville, that you would just cut and paste like his questions and answers from the 5 lesson lectures a lot of the time, because they were so like they covered the basics. So that came to mind. And I think that's really interesting. And I think a lot of those, what was interesting for me last week and the week before reading this stuff, again, the instructions, is like, first of all, Neville's freaking amazing. And I really, like, I do not look at his stuff nearly as much as I used to, because I'm just tired of it and the scene drives me crazy. But like, when you look at like the simplicity of what he's saying, like in those lectures, he's so articulate, but he's so like repetitive in a beautiful way. It's like hearing like almost like I was gonna say like a poem or something. Like he just says it over and over again. Like, and he talks about the state akin to sleep. He talks about you know, being attentive without effort. He does it so well. And what's interesting is that it seems so simple, like in terms of his explanation. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple to follow his instructions. And what's so interesting to me is how much we deviate from what he says, I would say, in terms of like on the online community, whether it be Reddit or YouTube.
I think it's shocking. So I know when I first got into Neville, I read all the books, and that was essentially kind of the main thing that I ever posted was just, okay, I've read this and this is what it means to me, because sometimes it's a little shocking how folks can read the same sentence and not understand it. So it's like, maybe I read it one way, but then somebody else is like, I'm totally hearing something different within this. And I don't know if it's just the level of kind of comprehension, if it's English language, you know, what it is, I don't know. But when I read it, I found it like so simple, and then I lost my way a little bit with it. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people, where if it doesn't work after like 1 or 2 nights of doing, you know, some sort of scene or feeling or lullaby method or whatever else you're deciding to do, that people look for something else. And my personal opinion is that the more that you look, that's actually the state that you're beginning to get yourself into, is the seeking state. And I did it to myself, where I was like, oh, well, this person said that they did it this way and this worked, and so I'll try that. But I would try it for a very minimal amount of times, not give anything really time to solidify and change my mind on what I wanted or the way I wanted to focus on it. And so I think these communities become almost, they feed that almost like addiction of seeking something new. That's kind of my personal opinion, because on the Q&As, literally everything that people would ask, either one, if they had read the thing that they had posted about, they would have answered their own damn question in the first place. Or 2, you could actually go back to one of his first books or the 5 lessons, which is probably one of the most simple things to read and to get it and have your own answer. Just answers. I don't know what people are looking for all the time. It's like, I don't know if they're looking for some like magic new answer or if they're just lazy. I'm not sure. But he does state it very simple, because the steps are very simple. And there's multiple ways to get to it. Like, it doesn't have to be visualization. I see black. I've shared that with folks all the time. I don't
Right.
have many skills in being able to see anything. I've worked on it and I can get minor stuff, but I can't see anything vividly. So you don't have to have that part, but
Right. I mean, that's one thing that in the, the lessons that we were reading last week, he makes very clear. It's like
yeah.
you can do the lullaby method. You can say, thank you, or whatever, whatever very short phrase you want to get into that state.
Right.
And I mean, so I just want to back up for 1 second. So everything you just said was, I think, like, really important. And so for people listening, Cecilia is like was the main moderator, I would say, of the, like, active moderator for the subreddit for a good year or two. Wouldn't you say that? I mean, people came and went, but you were consistent. I mean, I know you would have to detox every, month or two because it got to be too much or whatever, but you were there when other people were not consistently there moderating, I would say. Is that somewhat accurate?
For sure. So when I got added actually a few years, I probably moderated for 2.5 years, I think, if I look back on it, maybe 3.
It's like dog years, folks, if you
are
familiar with Reddit.
Yeah, like any gray hair I had, I contribute to that choice that I made. But so when I first started, there was some others that were pretty active. Edgar is definitely one that was, pretty active when I started,
right.
And understandably so. They also needed to detox, and you do get to a point where you're like, Jesus, I really need to step away from this, because it can be a lot. And it's not just a lot like in the going through the posts, it's a lot of like what people send you, like, I mean, horrific, and not just being mean horrific, but I have like DMs from folks like threatening to kill themselves if I don't help them get their SP. Like, that's heavy stuff where I'm like, you need to seek help. Like, this is not, you don't even know who I am. To their point, I could be some, fat ass living in my mom's basement for years and be, 70 years old and never did anything.
Most of them think that. I mean, this is, we've I read last year, I read that your post when you finally resigned, but I mean, to be frank, like, Cecilia's been sent pictures of poop multiple times.
Over and over. It was so disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, this is like the kind of stuff that she knows firsthand, and her answer about how the subreddit feeds itself. Like, I don't know if it's just Reddit in general or like these weird spiritual stuff.
I think it's the community. You see it on YouTube and TikTok.
Exactly. The longer I've gotten into the social media aspect, I really am not still that into it, but like from what I've seen is like, at first I was like, oh, this is like much worse on Reddit. And now being on YouTube more and just interacting with more people, trying to limit my interaction, but still seeing stuff, I'm like, oh, wow, this is like basically the same thing. It's just, it's this very toxic community, which is, again, what's so unfortunate, because the advice that Neville gives and a lot of the discussions on Reddit are so valuable. Like, in an ideal space, and even a few years ago when it wasn't, the subreddit wasn't nearly as big, there were so many intelligent conversations that were going on amidst the, expected bullshit, that I think a lot of people gained a lot of good advice and a lot of information from it. But it's just, it really is crazy. That's the word to use, I think. And you summated it well when you said that.
It's tough because, so I've always said and maintained that I think like manifestation or law of assumption or a law of belief, anything that you want to use, term that you want to use for it, is a borderline of a sane delusion, right? Like, but you have to keep the sane part. And I unfortunately, I just don't think a lot of people have. And what was always extremely shocking to me moderating was that if, like, let's say that you had, and this is a real example, you have somebody who says, hey, they go to post something and they say, can I manifest for other people? And it's declined. It's a beginner question. If you had read anything, you would know this answer. And so you can go to the Q&A if that's something you want. And the people like flip out with their, F the moderator type posts and etc. And if I would say, if there was one regret that I have about leaving, it's that my post came across like the F the moderator post bothered me so much that I left, and that wasn't my intention.
I don't
And
think
I
that's what
felt,
came. That's not how it came
I think
across, though.
other people did though, because like the comments that I got back was like, oh, I'm really sorry people treat you like that. And I got some messages about it, like, don't leave because of those people. I'm like, that wasn't the point. Like, I'm not leaving because of those
Yeah,
people. Although that shit gets tiring, right? Like, why? There just came this point where I woke up one day and I'm like, why do I keep doing this? Like, I don't get anything out of it. I'm not moving forward on my journey at all. As a matter of fact, I think it's delaying anything
agreed.
that I'm able to do.
That's every moderator I've spoken to. When I was
Yeah,
briefly moderating, I was like, I am not doing my normal level of, like I just didn't feel like as aligned as I usually did.
nothing.
I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, and it literally sucks you dry.
it does. Absolutely.
So yeah, it,
It does. And then people just kind of want more and more and more. And in fairness, and I'm just gonna say it, for the 10 moderators that were there, if everybody maybe had moderated onto the agreed kind of points that they were, then maybe it wouldn't have been so much. But what happens is you get a new moderator, and anybody that kind of came after me would probably say the same, maybe before me, I don't know, but they come on and everything is left to them to
right.
deal with. And then it becomes like so fucking overwhelming that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I've never understood is, if you're not going to go there and actually do the stuff, why do you remain a moderator? Like, is it a badge that you want? Is it, if you're not going to do it, just remove yourself? Or, some, I think it's just so they can improve their own post. But I have no idea. It
Yeah,
just
I
doesn't
mean,
make any sense.
for people who don't know Reddit, I mean, we don't want to get. It's not necessary to get too into the weeds there, but I
No.
mean, but there's definitely there's a lot of moderators on the Neville subreddit, but like as we're talking about, like very few are consistently active whatsoever. I mean, again, Cecilia really was the only consistently active one the last couple of years. And there is this thing where it's like, well, you're a moderator, you have more seeming prestige perhaps in your mind, but also you can improve, you can write whatever you want. If you have a side YouTube video channel or TikTok or Instagram or coaching thing, it's a way to get more people into it. When I went on this past summer, because Maggie, suggested that I post some stuff, that's what I immediately encountered. People just thought that I was trying to drum up business, and they, I understand that more after having been active on the subreddit for a couple of months. It's like, oh yeah, that's all this is. I mean, it's shocking. And this circles back to what you were originally saying. It's shocking how people interpret such fascinating spiritual and self-development advice like Neville's in the most desperate, overly simplistic, I would say like dogmatic, dumb way that they seemingly could. And it's very, very hard for me to understand. I still don't understand it. Some of it is a language thing, perhaps, like you said. But a lot of it is just, I don't know.
I think it's
insane. It's desperation. And like you said, it's insane. It's delusional thinking. And I mean, everyone who's listening to this should listen to Cecilia's first response when she's talking about the subreddit again, because it explains so much. Like people, oh my gosh, you talk about this well. Like it just, people don't get that this is not like, it's not a game, and it's not something like, it's something that like you have to live. And like that should be, I think, very humbling. And I think it was very humbling for somebody like Neville, let alone the people who become invested in his ideas usually, or any of these spiritual practices or law of attraction practices, whatever you want to call it. Instead, it becomes like a delusional ego trip for so many people. And it's like, it's seemingly too big to stop at this point. I mean, like that's what we see on social media now, is this, there's a real lack of humble sharing of ideas, I would say.
Well, and I think there's a lack of faith, which is a huge foundation of the teaching altogether. If I have faith in God, like even as myself as God, that God like lives in my head, right? If I, for me, if whether I have the faith that he's here, like I believe Neville's thoughts that like pretty much everything is being projected from me. I'm seeing things like this is all me and my kind of belief system on however that was built. Or in my opinion, even if I have it as an external God, some universe power to be that's going to kind of do everything for me and wants the absolute best for me, and you don't have issues with that, it's still a problem if there's like no trust there. So it still comes back to the same issue for me.
So you think, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. Like, you think that the reason that this stuff is so perverted on social media is because people don't actually have faith and trust, and they're desperate and are looking for a crutch or like you said, like a special magical thing that they've missed or something like that. And that's just all indicative of the lack of faith they have. And
well, back to the desperation, right?
Yeah.
If I'm desperate to change something, which you usually unfortunately see this around SP crowd, but I don't necessarily want to like quote unquote pick on them when I'm talking about that, because I don't think it's strictly within that
Right.
crowd.
It's
you
not,
just see it a little bit more there, in my opinion, from my experience.
It's more pronounced, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And so, but it's like the whole part of the teaching is having faith, like saying, okay, this is in the vast selection of things that could happen, because everything exists that could ever exist, and I can pick it by embodying it. But then if I want to control it to this point, like I'm not actually having faith that, oh, I can just kind of make this selection. I can have faith and gratitude that I have these things in my life and be thankful for what I have. I don't know. It's like almost like it does get this like perverse twisting of being so desperate to control something that you can't let go enough to not just continue to breed desperation feelings. So if I have faith in something, I'm pretty relaxed, right? Like I don't have to worry about this. It's going to happen. It's not a problem. But if I'm so concerned that I can't let go, I think, and I'm trying to find the best way to say this, the state that somebody is doing is not that they're embodying this thing that they want. The state that they're doing is that they're desperate to embody the thing that they want. And I think Neville talks about that a lot, where you can't just, you don't get what you want, you get what you are. And I think that's what gets missed a lot. And in these groups, especially, people feed on each other, because I can post like, oh, I'm having such a shit time and nothing ever works for me, and I don't know that I believe that this stuff is true. Well, then you'll get 5 other people who are, yeah, you're right, that's not true, look, you're doing everything right. How do you know they're doing everything right? It's a freaking post on Reddit. Like I can post whatever I want. I mean, I can say whatever the hell I want. Nobody there, knows that what I'm saying is true, or that I meditate every day, or that I give gratitude every day. I mean, a lot of folks, I think they just like want more and more information churned into their brain, but they don't actually do anything with it.
Yeah.
Other than complain it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually sad. Like that was one thing that I think, one of the biggest reasons that I decided I had to leave the community and the aspect that I was in it was because I was losing my empathy for folks. And I think at my core, I'm an empathetic person. Like I believe that you're real. Like I don't believe that anybody here is not real. And so their feelings matter to me. And I did feel bad for folks that were just like in these desperate places. And I'm like, I can't help you here. Like I can't help you through Reddit. I can't help you through YouTube. I can't help you through a TikTok post, because only you can do that for yourself, and you're not willing to, for whatever reason. You're just not. But as soon as I started to lose my empathy for folks and like rolling my eyes when people had like real problems, I was like, I have to get out of here. I don't like the person that I'm becoming while I'm here.
So you're confirming it wasn't the poo pictures that did it?
I mean, I hope that user feels really good about themselves. If anybody's listening, you can actually go on my profile. I shared that somewhere in some like comment or something. I shared the video of it.
Deleted, or hopefully it wasn't, but
oh my gosh, it's so terrible. I mean, that helped. That was disgusting.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and we'll put a link to this on this of some of your not of that
You want to
of
share
your
the poop
posts in
comment?
general. No, because I mean, you've written a lot of great posts, and again, what's tough, what I don't like about deciding not to go on Reddit for any spiritual stuff anymore is because I know I'm missing a lot of not only very intelligently written stuff, but stuff written by real people having real world success and having interesting angles that's happening now. It's not from 50 years ago. It's like real success stories. And not only is it inspiring, but like you can learn a lot of stuff, right? And I mean, one thing that I certainly learned from you and I would love for you to talk about is like, I know that you're into revision, and revision is not a technique I personally use that much. And it's not a technique that I don't think Neville talked about as much until like the early 50s. Like pruning shears revision, I want to say is not until the early 50s. I might be wrong about that. But he doesn't talk about it in 5 lessons. And it's, I just see it being a very effective tool and something that has helped so many people. So I would love for you to say a word on it or 1,000 words on it.
I'm obsessed with revision, but I still suck at it sometimes, right? So I am.
That's great. Listen, that is good advice. When you're not, you just keep on doing it. If you're into it,
because it. So he does talk about it in the Law and the Promise. I think it's that one. There's.
Right. And that's
like again, revision or something, but I think that might be 50s. I don't know the times well.
63. Yeah.
60, okay.
I might be wrong. Like there's part of me that's like, oh, he talked about revision way back in the day in Faith in Your Fortune, but pruning shears revision, that famous chapter, I think the point is it's not in 5 lessons. I think it's a little bit later.
Oh, right.
So what's interesting is like he developed, initially it seemed like the techniques that he shared over and over and over again were the ones we were talking about in 5 lessons, which is just a short, either like you place yourself in a different place, the bilocation thing, which is tough for a lot of people to do. An easier technique that still does not work well for a lot of people is condensing to a small action, like shaking a hand, hugging someone, a wedding finger. And then the third one is what we were talking about. Like if you are not like a proficient visualizer, just like the lullaby, thank you, isn't it wonderful method of repeating a short phrase. Revision belongs in those techniques as like the essential Neville techniques, I think.
So on that note, like when you kind of mentioned that the folks still have struggles with some of these other ones, and maybe we can get back to this a different time. This is for a different topic, but I really think it's because of what they do during the day. So like
I know we both feel that.
Yeah, you're kind of like canceling that shit out. Is pretty much what you're
we're
doing.
Both a fan of the 95.5 code, that Richard Dodd's book, and I mean we both talked about this before, but I mean it's like when you're doing a technique, it should buoy you, it should help carry you through the day if it's working effectively, or you are working on yourself so that it works better for you. I mean, in the 95.5 code, he basically says, listen, it doesn't matter what technique you're doing, it's what you're doing the rest of the day.
That's your state. The 95% of the time, because that is your state. And on top of that, I think that, and this is something I have fallen into, and I've actually had success when I'm like, no, damn it, stop it. I go back and forth. So let's say, I want this raise at work. No, actually, I don't want to work in corporate America anymore. No, I want this raise at work. No, I don't want to work in corporate America. And I do that to myself back and forth. And I think a lot of people that I've actually been able to talk to who are like intelligent and open to having conversations find themselves in the same spot. I want this person. I don't want this person. I want this person. I want somebody better. I want this. And you kind of go back and forth. Well, then, you're just bouncing back and forth. I don't necessarily think that it's like, oh my gosh, you've ruined everything for yourself. You're just screwed. No, you just need to make a choice and focus on that choice. And once I've been able to do that for myself, I've had success, and I've done that. I use all kinds of different techniques because I like to see what works for me and what doesn't, because as I've said, black, right? I don't see shit when I close my eyes. And my daughter told me that she can watch a movie in her head. And I was floored. I had never known that people could do that because mine's black. Right. Sometimes I get some cool squiggly lines. Like that's about it. I can just like think that I'm seeing something. It's kind of hard to explain. But for me, revision, so I'm trying to remember, and I might have to find it and send it to you, but there was a point where Neville said in some lecture or book, if there's anything you take from me, let it be revision.
Yes.
And then
Right.
in a Q&A at the end of one of his lectures, so I buy all of his lecture books and I read almost a lecture a day. And at the end of one of his lectures is a Q&A where a woman's asking about, whatever thing kind of came up. And he shares a story and he said flat out there, this would have happened faster had they practiced revision. Now, we are emotional creatures. I am definitely an emotional creature. When I feel something, I really can feel it, right? And so what I have had to start doing is catching myself in the moment, because once I let a feeling kind of sit and really get in there, I found it harder to revise. So like if you and I were having a conversation and you said something I didn't like, if I like kind of sat on that and worked on it and had an imaginary argument with you in my head and then tried to revise it tonight or tomorrow or next week, it takes me a lot longer for that to get resolved. But if I sit and like while you're doing it and I just kind of stop it and get control of my own mind, and I say to myself, and this is one that I've used, that's not what I'm hearing you say, I'm hearing you say this instead. It's been like shocking. Like I've had people parrot stuff back to me. One of the big ones that I have shared on the group as well was the burn on my hand. So I laid my hand flat in a about 425 degree oven, Fahrenheit. And I had burned my hand pretty bad and it was pretty gnarly. And so I revised it that day. Like my hand's throbbing. It hurt so bad. And I sat down and closed my eyes and I revised it. You would never know that I had burned myself. There's not a single scar on my hand. And anybody who's seen that burn was shocked that I don't have a mark. Now here's the thing. I didn't wake up the next day and the burn was gone, but I did wake up the next day to no pain. And it was a pretty quick healing process. So I do contribute that kind of stuff to revision, but I have to do it in the moment. If I wait, it's much harder. And Neville has talked about that as well. I believe it's in the lecture, The New Man, that if you kind of sit on something, it's going to be more difficult to revise later. It can still be done, but.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how there are definitely people who have success, like revising childhood trauma, for instance. I think it just makes so much sense to me, like what you said, and it shows the amazing power of our imagination. Like if you can nip something in the bud or get at it quickly, that's by far the easiest thing than letting the snowball start to roll, and it's, right. And like you say, like if you wait even an hour, it's very different than like working with it pretty much right away. Cause that's like when I feel like the emotions are much, it's malleable then, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's, yeah, it's so interesting. It's so, I mean, for you, do you have like a practice with it, or it's more just like spontaneous? Like, is there something daily you do in terms of revision, or is it just like, it's like something comes up that you don't like and you immediately try to revise it?
So I tried to do the process where at night and this is also like an attention exercise, but where you try to like go through your day.
Yeah.
And I always do it laying down in bed and I always fall asleep, right? Like literally always. And I'm like, I don't even know how far through the day I got. I think maybe I just made myself a better cup of coffee than what I had had yesterday. Like I don't do very well with this.
Right.
And so I actually started working out of probably sheer laziness, right? Of not wanting to keep focusing on this attention thing. But I started just doing in the moment kind of stuff. Either somebody's saying something to me I don't like, I'm not finding something that I want, not getting the message that I want, etc. And it's essentially, it sounds kind of dissociative, which I don't like, but essentially taking myself out of that moment and just being like, this is not what I'm seeing, this is not what I'm hearing, this is not what I'm accepting. And it does change. It doesn't always change immediately. Like it might be the next day. Like I've had folks where I got into maybe a, kind of work argument with somebody and in the moment it was like, this is not what I'm hearing. This is how it's going to go for me instead. And then the next day they call me and they're like, we've actually changed our mind. We're going to do XYZ, we don't want to do what we were talking about yesterday. And it's literally in exact alignment with what
Right.
I had said, which is just like, it's every single time it happens, it's like fucking mind blowing.
Right. It's
And
crazy. I mean, that's
even,
nuts. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
like
amazing. Yeah.
even like stupid stuff, like I'll share with folks here, like I want to see an armadillo, right? Like a real live armadillo.
Right.
And this has been my joke kind of thing, right? I want to see this damn armadillo. And whenever I focus on it, I see armadillos all over the place. People like send me armadillos. I see stuffed animals of armadillos. Somebody gave my dog a toy armadillo. Like there's stuff all over the place. But I still haven't seen the live one. And when I really kind of sat and looked at this, I think it's because I get so much shits and giggles out of seeing these like non-live armadillos.
Yeah,
Like this is
yeah.
more of like what I'm getting. And it's funny, right? Because like we have a group text, between some of us ex-redditors that we talk about stuff. And even you guys then end up getting like armadillo stuff, which is
Right.
just really, because it's a pretty weird animal, right? I don't think any of us live in Texas. So to have like armadillo is pretty a little odd. But you can find it with even stuff like that. And like I did it with a flamingo just for shits and giggles, and had flamingos popping up all over the damn place. And it's always just amazing to me, like the way that you can direct this. But it's so simple. Like I've
Right.
had, so there was like somebody that I worked with that, this was a couple of years ago, and I didn't want to work with them anymore. I didn't want to see them at work anymore. Like they just, and I know this makes me sound like a shitty person, but they ended up somewhere better anyway. So send them love and light. But I didn't want to see them at work anymore. And it was a very simple, like kind of, deep breath that my workplace is stress-free, and it would be more simple for me if they were no longer here. Literally the next week, they turned in their notice. And when they turned in their notice, they were told, we actually don't need you to stay. We'll pay you out for the 2 weeks and you can leave. And they were just gone. And so, like, it's, to your point, it's so simple, but we add so much more to it to just, I guess, make it more difficult. I don't know why. But it's a desperation. Anything we're desperate for, I think, is what takes longer.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, and I'm so glad that you explained. I feel like there's not much more to explain in regards to revision. I mean, there is. You can look at the Neville lectures. There are some. I would say there's some certainly on the subreddit, but also on YouTube. There's some intelligent commentary if you look hard. Like
Oh,
people
yeah.
talking about revision. Like and there's just the stories like you just told are amazing, and there's countless stories like that. I mean, there's something to it, and if you want to get more like scientific or psychological. I mean, I think you and I would be like, well, that's fine. I mean, this is like the reticular activation system and us identifying stuff that we otherwise wouldn't identify. The thing is like, I'm cool with that. Like, it doesn't matter. The point is you get interesting. The point is this stuff works. It doesn't matter if we're using like biblical based language like Neville does, or if we're not. It's like, this is stuff that can change your life in a practical way. And if you want to get really far out with it, you're welcome to. It's just, however you do it, these are techniques that you can apply. And, one of the other interesting things reading 5 Lessons last week was like, he's like, use these techniques to fit your temperament, and it's like, he's not like, he does kind of say like, do it this way, but like, he's not an asshole about it. Like Neville was not an asshole. That's the other thing that drives me nuts about what's happened with this cult around him. It's like, he was a very open-minded person. He was the kind of person where it's like, you could disagree with him and he would be like, oh, that's an interesting theory, like, and he, he was a big reader of various ideas as well. So it's just so interesting. And revision is a great tool. I don't personally, I feel like I should try it more. I always just go for more of like the golden key approach of like the Emmett Fox approach, where it's like someone says something or there's something that happens, and right away, if I don't like it, if I'm able to do it, like, which is again up to me, that takes self-discipline. It's like, I just like, instead of then mentally going to that place, I think of God instead, I guess you could say. The idea being just that you're thinking of like, the perfection of life instead. And like, what so often happens then is that the issue that you begin to worry about, it just shifts. It becomes like an illusion. It's like you're terrified that something bad is going to happen, but by breaking that cycle by thinking of something better, like of thinking of God or thinking of the solution you want, it's enough for a shift to occur. And like the synchronicity of these shifts, like when someone parrots your words back or somebody leaves your office that you don't want to be in your office, it's just crazy. It's amazing.
It's the parroting, I think, like
the parroting's nuts.
Parroting is so nuts. And like every time it happens, I'm like, say that
right,
again.
right.
Like, holy shit, do that again. Like, that was amazing. And to your point, though, so to me, like going and shifting to thinking about God is still a form of revision, right? Just with another name, because you're not focusing on the problem.
Exactly.
So I think if maybe people could look at it a little different, and if you struggle maybe to see the solution when you're pissed off or angry or sad or whatever else, then yours, what you talked about, and I wasn't aware of that one. I haven't actually read much of Fox, but if you like just shift that to think of God or love or peace or whatever it is, I choose to see this in this.
Right.
To me, that's still a form of revision, and it's brilliant because I think, and I struggle with this. I'm probably going to use that because sometimes when I'm really pissed off, I'm really upset about something, I do struggle to see a solution. What is the solution? They won't piss me off anymore. Well,
right.
That's not actually a solution, right? Then I'm just focusing on the problem still. But if you look at, like thinking of God or some warmth within inside you or love or that everything is peace or everything works out for you or whatever it is, it just shifts your whole like state of being, which is the whole point of all of it. And if you look at all of them, whether it's, any of the teachers, they all say the same shit, just in different words.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is it's like, something else that just drives me nuts. And really the reason that I started doing the podcast and then, slowly ambled to YouTube, because there's just a lot more activity on YouTube, people talking about this stuff. It's just, I was like, all this shit's the same, or 90% of it's the same. And like the fact that people aren't told that more, I think is just totally backwards. Like people need to incorporate these ideas more holistically. And then also ideally, they don't have to, but ideally, I would say incorporate, self-improvement, psychology, counseling, therapy,
right,
all that stuff together and be like, you know what, this isn't so, I don't have to compartmentalize my manifesting from my therapy or from my self-improvement stuff I do or my exercise even, or whatever. Like it's about shifting your state, like you said. And like the state thing can't be emphasized enough. It's like, what state am I in right now? I mean, and listen, most of the people I meet, maybe it's just all of our temperaments, we're all very lazy. I mean, that's one reason we've gotten into this stuff. It's like, for me, it's like, it's too complicated always to think of a solution. I'm always just like, I just revert to God. And I always, I did that before I got into manifesting. I just didn't realize that like, it was like a thing that could also like actually externally improve my life. So obviously it was always more subtle like before that. But like for, what really clicked with me with Neville when I found him was like, just his idea of like, if you're in a relaxed state, that's an abundant state right there. And then he said, he was like, if you're in that abundant state and stay there more often, you inhabit it has to come to you. And I was like, oh shit, I suspected that somewhere in my mind. And like plenty of other teachers imply that, but that was like, no, that's how it works. And I was like, wow, that is pretty far out there. And then the crazy thing is it's true. I mean, it's like, so it's so state-based. But at the same time, states are fascinating, but it's one of the things that like, I don't usually like discussing, like I don't discuss it on like my YouTube channel because people are so dogmatic about it. Like you're in this state, now you're in this state. Like, and it's like, it's so stupid.
Well,
and it's like
shift. So like there's multiple,
you're going to shift
from them. Yeah.
People shift states, whatever, and I know Neville,
I've probably shifted like 8 times during this conversation.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, but it's like, to simplify it, it's like, feel more relaxed, feel good to the best of your abilities. And that's going to mean going through shit, feeling shit, whatever. But like, do it like, and do it because you want to, because it makes freaking practical sense to feel better. And if you feel better, you're in a more positive state, which is going to make better stuff come into your life, Well,
and I think it's important to note too, that it's not about this toxic positivity movement either, because I get asked about that a lot. where it's like, well, isn't this just toxic positivity? And I said, there's no time that I have ever told somebody you have to feel fucking happy and shit and rainbows all the damn time. I hope you don't mind my French on your stuff, but so I'm pretty sure in your stuff you've got it too. But then I was like, oh, wait a minute, am I dropping those bombs a little too much? But it's different than toxic positivity, because if somebody kicks me in my shin, I'm not going to be, to me, toxic positivity is to be like, I am still so thankful they kicked me in my shin, because that means I can feel.
Bypassing. It's spiritual bypassing. And I'm like, that's a stupidity.
No. Instead, if somebody kicks me in my shin, then, I would not then continue to have like arguments in my own head with this person regarding the kicking of my shin. I would remove myself from that person.
Right.
And so, and that to me is the difference here, because I think that happens a lot where people are like, well, you have to be thankful for everything. I'm like, no, I don't. I can decide. And I can even say like, man, shit, I know that I did this. Like I have events in my life that I can say, oh yeah, I caused this one. And I can actually trace it back and I know that I caused this one. That doesn't mean I have to be thankful for it. I can be like, well, there's a good lesson. So I want to learn not to do that again, or I want to learn to maybe really think ahead before I make some of these choices, because, it's there's not a universe or a God or somebody out there, again, in my opinion, that's saying, no, this isn't for your greater good. This is actually going to hurt your feelings. So I'm not going to do that. No, it's whatever you're focused on. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Kind of went off on a tangent. I don't know if I made sense.
No, you definitely made sense. As I said, I think I already said this, but people should listen to this, what we're recording again, because there's a lot of gemstones in here. Yeah, I mean, so you still have a lot of, you still read Neville nightly, pretty much, right? You still regularly read Neville? Yeah.
I am essentially almost at all times, I kind of get made fun of for this. I'm essentially at all times reading like 3 books. I read one that is usually just some sort of fiction, crime, fun kind of book to read. And then usually 2 are self-help. And one is, there's some that are more self-help, like not necessarily manifestation type self-help. They're more
self-improvement, like
self-improvement, learning more about yourself, how to become more curious. I don't know if I could, like, I'll plug a book. You can cut it out if you want to. Plug a book that I'm reading right now that I absolutely love. It's called More Yourself by Sarah Waters. And that's less about positivity and learning about like accepting all the parts of yourself, and kind of understanding why those parts are there. So even if you have these moments, and to me, it goes back to, still ties to manifestation. If I have these moments that I'm upset, well, can I take a moment and consider, why am I upset? Like, why is this bothering me? Why is this something that triggered me, or that I would behave in the way that I am? And then, you kind of uncover some gems in there that I think you can work on. So that book's been fantastic. And then I'm usually reading some sort of manifestation one. Either, I read a lot of Neville lectures. I also have just recently, who's somebody I have not read before, and people I think have a lot of opinions on him, but the Joe Dispenza, Changing the Habit of Being Yourself, which I've actually enjoyed. And so, but I have, like, Richard Dott's, the 955 code is one that I've actually read now 3 times, because I enjoy that one quite a bit. So I'm usually reading something, but I like to read the Neville lectures, and I don't mind the ones of his that are later.
Right. I was going to say, but do you think, were you always that way? I mean, like, you were able to get into the older stuff, like, because I just find the later stuff so much more complicated, especially for like
extremely complicated.
Yeah.
And no, I actually just I've gotten into the later stuff probably in the last year.
Yeah.
So before that, it was much more focused on his books, some of the easier.
Right.
All I his books say easier, but
no, but it's very different. I mean, the symbolical stuff makes a lot more sense just on like a practical level for like improving yourself, in my opinion. In his books, he stopped basically after The Promise. The only book he published, or he just published a couple of books after The Promise, the main one being Beyond the Promise. But I mean, it's like I always say, because on my channel I think I'm overly critical of his later stuff, and I think his later stuff is really interesting, and you can get into it. I always am trying to talk to people about, like, if you're new-ish to Neville, or like just want really practical information. I think his later lectures, there's so much.
I think it'd turn you off really quick.
High mysticism, yeah. But a problem that I've seen for years, and I feel like I'm shouting out in the woods here and no one's hearing me, is that most of his lectures on YouTube are from, it's his later stuff, just because of the recording technology. They easily were able to record that stuff in the 1960s, and it's wicked convoluted. So it's like, I mean, it's not convoluted, but like a sentence of a lot of that stuff, like you can chew on it for a long time. I mean, all of Neville's stuff, a sentence or two you can chew on for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But like, if you're like getting into Neville and you're like, oh, I'm going to listen to his lectures, and you listen to, like, what was it, like The New Man, or like those lectures are not like, they're amazing, like, but they're like way out there. And like, I would never have wanted to gotten into Neville that way. And listen, I think I did in part. Like, I was like you, I read his books first, but like I was trying to find lectures. He's got a great voice. He's a great orator. So it's like, oh, and it took me a while to realize like this 60s stuff is very different. It's like a different, he's just talking about different stuff and using a very different style. That probably, if you're new to Neville, or even like familiar with Neville, is going to be, you have to be into that kind of thing, like, so anyway, I just think that's important, because too many people get into Neville either from YouTube influencers who half the time have no real background with Neville stuff. And you don't have to be like an academic. I mean, like, people think I'm an academic. I mean, fucking A, like, I'm just somebody, most of the people that I, talk to in the Neville community, everyone's just self-taught. Like, but like,
oh yeah,
read his books. Half of the people coaching on Neville coaches, I feel like they haven't even read his, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, it's unbelievable. Like, it's crazy.
The majority of it doesn't even align. And it can be fine. It can work in the same way, but it's not aligned.
Mainly the Neville coaches are there, in my opinion, to inspire you. And if you need that.
And take your money.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's a different conversation too, because it's like, if you're at a place where you want to invest in yourself and you want someone to believe in you, so you believe more in yourself, it can be a worthwhile investment. But that said, it's different than going to a counselor or coach or some kind of person who actually like is going to work with you in terms of like how you're feeling right now, not based on Neville stuff. The SP people I've worked with or just spoken to who have worked with some of these SP coaches, I've just been so appalled with the stuff they say. It's like parroting bad Neville and saying that's like serious advice for like a broken relationship or like severe trauma based on a relationship or abuse. It's like, that's like,
it's very sad.
It's very sad. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's the undercurrent of a lot of this. Our conversation is light and jovial, but the undercurrent of this social media thing is very, very sad.
Because there's so many folks that are in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
And to me, if you're unable to recognize that, and not only just like recognize it, but not provide empathy for it, and instead be like, well, if you pay me angel number $555 and we spend 909 minutes together, then, I can, and you say this affirmation 1,840 times a day. And it's just sad, because I'm sure it works for some people, right? Because they're able to connect with the feeling. And so then you've got these people who are like, oh my God, I got him back. And this is the greatest thing ever.
Right.
But you have so many who just end up still just they're heartbroken and broke.
Right. You only hear the positive testimonials. You don't hear the testimonials.
No, you get, because the ones that aren't like get, deleted or, I'm trying to think, deleted or hidden. It's just,
it's a crazy scene
to me.
It's a crazy scene. Yeah. I mean, and again, it comes back to, for Neville these days, especially, it really probably is always best to go back to the books.
And it's all there, or the 5 lessons.
Or 5, I mean, really, if you really want to 80-20 it or whatever, do that, throw in revision. I mean, you know that I'm like you. I mean, I think there's huge value in, you don't have to necessarily read 5 books at once or whatever,
Right.
but exploring these different ideas from different angles. I just think it's really impressive, like that you're more of what's the word, like you've stayed with Neville for a long time. Like I can't do that with like really any teacher. I mean, I go back to Emile Coué because like I view him as like my friend at this point, but like I bounce around, and like I really benefit from that. But I feel like you really benefit from sticking with Neville. Like I think that's impressive, like because like you're never delusional, and it's like such a fine, we'll wrap it up soon, but like this is like a good place to leave it. It's like it really is a fine line with Neville's stuff of like having one foot in sanity and the other foot like, you're really going wild, and
it's kind of La La Land.
Right. And it's hard to navigate that. So I'm always impressed with you being able to do that well and sticking with Neville. Because if I read too much Neville in a row, like, I mean, this happened to me when I first got into it. I was like, I just start to feel disassociated a little bit. And then I'm like, I need something to ground me,
I think that's an important part though. So it's not to say that I've never gone through that. And I do read like a bunch of other folks as well, which I think helps. Like Joseph Murphy is definitely one that I always recommend to folks too, especially if they want something a little bit more simplistic that's not as biblical. But I think for me, I've had to make sure that I stayed pretty grounded with the Neville stuff, especially as you get into kind of some of the later bits.
Right.
I also, probably about 2 years ago, had an incident in my room that I would only describe as a vision. It definitely was not a dream. It's the only time I've had anything like that happen. And I think that's probably why I got kind of curious in some of his older stuff as well.
Totally.
It was just because I was like, I've had this experience that really, I mean, it shook me it actually scared me. It was a snake. So I was in bed and there's a snake that slithered across my ceiling to the point that I physically jumped up out of bed to go warn my children that there was a snake in the house, and it was on the ceiling and I don't know where it went. And as I hit the door, I was like, wait a minute, that didn't actually happen. But it wasn't a dream. It's very hard to explain. And so that was the part for me that I was like, oh, I really want to learn a little bit more about this, because he talks about seeing a snake in a different type of way. But I think it is easy to become disillusioned, and it is easy to find yourself wondering like, what is real and what is not real. And for a lot of people, I think they get so caught up in thinking that people aren't real, and I don't buy that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Somebody described it to me as if God were a vase and the vase broke, not to say that God broke, but there was like fragments of this vase. Would it all be separate pieces, or would it still be one vase? And that really struck me. I actually wish I knew the user's name, because that was somebody on Reddit, and I would give them credit for saying that, because I was like, holy shit, yeah, that's kind of how it is. We're all these like fragments, but that doesn't mean that we're not still one of the whole, but that still means you're still having an experience. Like your life doesn't just freeze and end when you and I get off the phone because I'm no longer giving you attention. And I think too many people fall into wanting to believe that desperately.
I totally agree. I think that's a huge problem. But, at the same time, that's their opinion. It's very hard for me to relate to that. It always has been.
Me too.
Like I don't really get that at all. Like, yeah. And I mean, again, that's the thing, like with Neville, is like, he obviously is one of the most far out, new thought or just spiritual thinkers of like the last 100 years. He's way out there, but like he was always grounded in, he wasn't nuts is what it comes down to. You know what I mean? He might've been a mad mystic. But like, he wasn't, there was always some grounding there. And if you really think, we hang up the phone, you disappear. And it's just, nothing in my life, and I've had a lot of weird experiences, nothing in my life backs up this idea that like, oh, it's just, you disappear. No. It's all, and that, I mean, that is, if you think that way, that is such a recipe for sociopathy that, it's just like,
well, and I think those are the people then that are having the most struggles, because then when something happens that it doesn't align to that belief, it's almost like they're they're unable to remain in touch with reality. And people are always like, oh, the 3D, don't pay attention to the 3D. No,
Right.
no, dude, I live here. Like, of course
I
I'm going to pay
never
attention to
really
it.
got that either. I just, the 3D, 4D thing, I mean, it's interesting, but it's so overplayed. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's like you people are like, you just are out to lunch, in my opinion. It's wild.
Yeah, like if I pinch myself, I'm going to feel it.
Right.
And I'm not, I don't
Cecilia,
think
it's
that
only
there
the
would be a time I
3D
can't do
though.
that. Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have to feel it.
Yeah. And you
And
sent
I
that.
want to, like, I want to feel
Right.
things here and I
Yeah.
want to experience it regardless of what like the end result is, whether that's, awakening in my own skull or, if I find out that life goes on forever, whatever it is, which to me sounds quite exhausting if I'm gonna be honest. But I just
Well, didn't Neville too?
never get that.
Yeah, I know there's all these ideas. It's all of these ideas where it's like, why can't we just be more like we're here now, experiencing what we're experiencing, and we're,
and you can choose what you experience.
And you're right. You're choosing. You're experimenting how you experience. Can't that be enough? I guess not, because part of our mind wants that solution. I mean, yeah, it's just interesting.
I just don't know how people get there. I guess that's maybe what I've always.
Maybe we're never gonna know.
Yeah.
Maybe we will. Not. Maybe we'll. Maybe we'll have another vision of that and figure it out.
I know. Maybe I'll figure it out. That'll be the next call. I'll be like, I have learned all the keys to life.
Joe Dispenza. Listen, he might have it for. So thank you again. And
absolutely, thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording. We're going to chat for a couple more minutes, but yeah, I hope that people listening got something good out of this. I'll link to Cecilia's Reddit account so you can read some of her great stuff. And hopefully now you understand a little bit more why social media is a terrible place to learn about Neville Goddard. Until next time, enjoy. Bye-bye.